So, if you've seen these two videos on the screen right here, you probably know that I'm a pretty big nostalgia freak. And when I think of my childhood nostalgia, one of the main things that comes to mind is the golden age of Cartoon Network. There were so many shows that I absolutely loved growing up. And I'm not sure what Cartoon Network has now, but from what I've heard online, the consensus is it's not as strong of a lineup nowadays. So we're gonna look back at a lot of the shows ranging all the way from the late 90s up until the 2010s when I really got into Cartoon Network, and we're just gonna reminisce about a lot of them. But first, I wanted to go over some that I didn't watch as much for whatever reason, or either that or didn't see at all for a couple of them. So let's just quickly run through those before I get into the main meat and potatoes of this video. So first, I want to just start off with Batman Bold and the Brave. Really good Batman show. Honestly, probably one of the best Batman animated shows. Me personally, I just wasn't ever huge on the superhero kick, so it wasn't my #1 pick. Honestly, nothing wrong with the show, just watch others more than it. Samurai Jack is an example of a show that I believe was just a little bit before my time. You know, I did see a couple episodes of Samurai Jack, but it's not something that I have memories of watching for real, but had to mention it because I know for a lot of people a little older than me, that was probably one of your favorite Cartoon Network shows, so I apologize for not being able to talk more about it. Camp Lazlo is one that I definitely did watch for sure, but I don't have much to say about it other than I remember it being like a cool little goofy show to watch in between the other shows. Powerpuff Girls is one that when I told my fiance I was making this video and showed her the list and the ones that were on that didn't watch much, she called me crazy for this, but I honestly think that's the difference between male and female. Powerpuff Girls just didn't hit that spot for me the way it probably did for female viewers or even a lot of guys too, I'm sure. I just never got into Powerpuff Girls that heavy. Generator Rex is one that when I was doing research for this video, I don't know if I've ever even heard of this show. I probably have in like previews or something in between other shows, but I don't believe I ever watched an episode of Generator Rex, and if I did, I sure as hell don't remember anything about it. Duck Dodgers is another one that I honestly don't think I've ever even heard of until I was looking shit up today. Yeah, I don't know anything about Duck Dodgers, so if you watch that show, let me know in the comments if it was fire. And then we got a show like Chowder. Now, I definitely watched Chowder, don't get me wrong. It was a show that they played quite often in the block that I used to watch, but it was it had a different vibe to it compared to a lot of the other shows that I just didn't personally resonate with. It was kind of like out of the box. The only character I really remember is like, I think Chowder's grandpa or like the old man in the show. I don't know. Don't remember much about Chowder, but shout out. And now this one I'm probably gonna catch a lot of flack for, and honestly deservedly so, because Johnny Bravo is one that was also just a little bit before my time. Now my cousin that's 5 years older than me loved Johnny Bravo, and the episodes I have seen of it, amazing show. But for me, you know, I always watched Johnny Test. And as a kid, I low-key thought Johnny Test and Johnny Bravo were like a continuation of each other or like a prequel or something. I thought Johnny Test was Johnny Bravo for whatever reason. So in my head, I thought watching Johnny Test was like making up for not watching much Johnny Bravo. I don't know. I really need to go back and watch that one. That's one I'm actually kind of mad at myself I didn't see more of. Dexter's Laboratory, another one that I kind of beat myself up for not remembering more of because I surely watched this a lot. Like I remember his sister always messing with him and all the wacky experiments, but I can't like really picture any specific episodes in my head of Dexter's Laboratory. Again, I think it was just slightly before my time. I think other shows just really took up my headspace more so than it did. Cow and Chicken. Now, the only reason I didn't give this its own portion of the video is because there's not really much to say about Cow and Chicken other than it was a fun, goofy show to watch, you know, early morning, middle of the day. Got a good vibe to it for sure. Nothing bad to say about Cow and Chicken, but yeah, just nice, goofy show. Clarence is another one of those shows, kind of like Chowder, where the vibe was just not really what I was looking for out of a cartoon, but I do remember this one episode where they were like in an arcade or something. I don't even know if I'm mixing that up with another show or not, but if not, then it'll pop up there. But yeah, Clarence. And now Ben 10 is the last one I have on this list. And that's another really popular one that people are probably gonna be shocked that I don't remember much about, but it's simply because, again, my older cousin, really big fan of Ben 10. Me, I just couldn't get into it as much. I really did love the animation style. I thought that always looked sick. I think there was just too much going on in Ben 10. I couldn't ever really wrap my head around it when I was a kid for some reason. And honestly, I think it was because they ended up coming out with that newer Ben 10 show in the 2010s versus the original 2000s one, which was much better. Speaking of that, we're going to touch on a show that had that same treatment very soon. And unfortunately, due to time, I can't do a full breakdown of every show that I'm doing here, but I do want to kind of touch on some specific episodes and just characters that I loved from these shows. So the first one I'm going to start with is probably one of Cartoon Network's biggest hits ever, Regular Show. Now, I've mentioned Regular Show in those other two videos I popped up on screen, but I didn't really have time to go into it. So with Regular Show, I loved almost every character. You obviously had Mordecai and Rigby, which were the backbone of the show, always getting into antics. Then you had Skips, Pops, Benson, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost. The whole supporting cast of characters, even down to the enemies, were very compelling, very interesting. And I love the dynamic of just two, middle-aged guys, like mid-20s is what I always pictured them as. Just guys that probably never went to college, never really did anything. It's very relevant to the world because it's like a real situation of two friends that just happen to stumble upon a job, and they just are goofy guys that happen to get into unworldly situations. Like, I remember, I will never forget the episode where Mordecai and Rigby are flying through space on a clock fighting each other, and I believe Mordecai knocks Rigby off the clock and he just disintegrates. Like, this show was pretty metal for kids, honestly. And fun fact, it was meant to originally be an Adult Swim show, which is kind of crazy if you really think about it. J.G. Quintel, one of my favorite animators, like, seriously, that show made my childhood. The reason I started with it is because there's just so many episodes I could go off of. The one where they take Pops to a wrestling match, or I believe they follow in there, actually. They didn't take him. And one of my favorite episodes is where Rigby's scared of this car named Eileen, and it's obviously a parody of Christine from Stephen King, and it's just episodes like that actually genuinely kind of scared me when I was younger, which is really effective. I love that. I love the one where it's like the Punchies episode, the Sandwich of Death, like where they're having the Taekwondo, man, shit. And the one where they're cleaning out the ballroom and like awaken all the spirits, like bro. The one where Skips, it's his birthday and they're trying to get him a cake, and like they end up having to deal with the baby gods of immortality, or man, I don't know. And Benson always raging, holy shit, man. Benson raging is just, there's so many compilations on YouTube of that, and there's a reason for it. It's because it is absolutely freaking cinema every single time. And I even love the dynamic between Mordecai and Rigby, like when Mordecai is trying to get with Margaret, being a simp, and Rigby's always coming like cock blocking. Just, there's so many dynamics in that show. I could go on forever and ever. Muscle Man with the, my mom, like, bro. Look, if you were there, you were there. If not, if you're younger, please go back and watch Regular Show. Out of any show in this video, loved Regular Show. Now to touch on another one that is really near and dear to my heart. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Now, I know it's kind of crazy that I saw a bunch of this one, as I believe it was from 02 to 08, which I was only alive for like 3 years after, or I was only alive for 3 years that it was airing. But that's one that I definitely went back and watched, primarily due to my cousin. Shout out to him. But I absolutely love that show. I think it was mainly because of Grim. Grim was just such a dope character. Like, I mean, even his voice actor down to that. Love the voice actor for Grim. If you've never watched that show, definitely go check it out. Because you even had side characters like Irwin, which was just like the always scared comedic relief kid. There's not any specific episodes I really want to like hark on for Billy and Mandy, because they were really all pretty solid. I can't say anything bad about that show. For the time that it was made, it was like way ahead of its time. honestly, even as an adult, I feel like I could definitely go back and watch it and I would still enjoy it almost just as much. Because there wasn't really many shows other than one I'm gonna get into later that were in that kind of like spooky vibe. And as a horror fan, I ate that up. Loved Billy and Mandy. Codename Kids Next Door, man. Number 1 through 5. Now, that show was kind of a crazy one. If you really think about the premise of it, it's 5 kids in a treehouse hideout that are basically special agents fighting against old people. Like, and by old people, I mean like people my age, like young adults, teenagers, you know, of course the older crowd. But that show was really dope just because of all the different gadgets and antics they got up to. Again, not really any specific episodes I want to hark on for Codename Kids Next Door. I just kind of wanted to show some love to it. I do remember some of the episodes where, like, I remember them being in a grocery store and there being something with like cheese, or I don't know. There was one episode that was really gross that's kind of coming back to me right now. But overall, that was another show that my cousin kind of got me into, and I was a really big fan. Now, I was talking about that spooky vibe. Courage the Cowardly Dog was probably the most effective of that out of any of the shows. Now, there's this one specific episode of Courage that I really have to mention, and that's the King Ramses episode, where bro's just kind of sitting there like, oh, swaying in the wind. Hell nah. Hell nah. And then you had Muriel, which is just a sweet old lady, always getting transformed into these crazy things by these monsters. And then you got Eustace over here, which is just Courage's biggest op. It's like you're already scared, but then you got this old coot over here constantly yelling at you, putting on a mask to scare you. I mean, that show just really hit something for me too. I think, to somebody who used to really identify as like an outcast, I think anybody that felt kind of like anxiety or had any of those feelings, when you watch Courage, you can kind of relate to that, because it's this dog that's constantly scared out of his mind, but he's really alone, having to figure out how to beat these monstrosities, these supernatural entities, whether it be like, you know, zombies or ghosts or whatever amalgamations they got him fighting against that week. But yeah, that King Ramses episode scared me to my core. I don't know what it was about it, but the vibe was so eerie on that. Just so eerie. But yeah, shout out to Courage. A lot of trauma from that show, but a lot of great memories and a lot of entertainment. And then you got Adventure Time, which again, there's a lot to say about it, but once again with Adventure Time, the supporting cast and the main cast of characters were all just very interesting, very compelling. You have the ones everybody knows, like obviously Jake the Human, or whoa, Finn the Human, Jake the Dog, Princess Bubblegum, but then you have Lemon Drop, which was, you know, hilarious to me back in the day. Everybody used to be screaming like Lemon Drop. And then you got Ice King, which ended up having a crazy character arc where later on in the series you actually start to really feel bad for him, even though he was like one of the main villains. And speaking of villains, we have to mention the Lynch, which was just a terrifying villain. There's this one episode I remember very distinctly where Finn is scared of the ocean and he's just super terrified of it. But then eventually, you know, his fears, he overcomes his fears, and that was a pretty powerful episode. You also have all the other supporting cast members, like the peppermint guy, I can't remember his name right now, Fiona, Bebot, I believe was his name, the, you know, Jake's little like N64 type device that was always dancing around. But I do also want to touch on this one episode of Adventure Time that I remember very distinctly that stuck with me, where the whole Princess Bubblegum's kingdom gets turned into zombies. Like, yo, Call of Duty Zombies and Adventure Time? Shit, I was ready for that. You really just can't go wrong there. You had Marceline, the Vampire Queen, another really good story arc, another really good character. For a kid's show, the characters in this show had crazy development. Like over the show, if you watch it from season 1 to when it ended, all the characters just evolve and become honestly something way different than what they started as. So I can really appreciate that as well. And now on to a kind of tricky subject. Teen Titans. Because the original Teen Titans show was gritty, it was kind of dark, it was humorous, but not too humorous. You know, all the characters felt legit. You know, Robin, you know, he liked Starfire, but he wasn't what the kids call a simp nowadays. But then you go over to Teen Titans Go, which was the one that was primarily out during my childhood. And oh boy, Teen Titans Go has a place in my heart. I can't act like it doesn't. I don't hate it, I really don't. But just knowing how good the original Teen Titans was, they kind of took that concept and turned it into G-rated, just completely different show. Like, I preferred the original animation style and the original vibe of the show a lot. Honestly, the original Teen Titans felt more akin to like an anime than a cartoon. And I'm not even a big fan of anime, but it worked really well in that. But honestly, I really can't stand how they turn Robin into this like just simp for Starfire. Like, this literally his whole character most of the time. I mean, there's literally an episode where bro turns himself into a cat, into a literal animal, to try to be closer to Starfire. I about said Starlight. I've been watching The Boys season 5. Great show. Different video though. But man, honestly, the original Teen Titans, freaking awesome. Like, some of the fight scenes from that, just even some of the scenes where Robin's just sitting like looking out at the city. Man, this straight aura. I don't like to overuse that word, but fuck me, man, that original Teen Titans was aura. Teen Titans Go, I don't know, man. It was kind of a mixed bag. Like, I fucked with it, but yeah. And then you got Ed, and Eddy, which I honestly probably should have put in the don't remember much, because I don't remember much specifics about it, but I couldn't bring myself to do that just because of how much I used to watch Ed, and Eddy. It was one of my cousin's favorite cartoons. I do remember like the bubble gum, definitely them always chewing bubble gum, the damn kid with the plank, that was always hilarious. A lot of the antics they got up to, if you were like a rowdy kid or like a, you know, this was basically, Ed, and Eddy was like Beavis and Butthead, but for slightly younger kids. Honestly, the best way I can describe it. They were, you know, one of them was the mastermind, one was the dumb one was kind of the crafty one. It's like they had a dynamic that worked well together. The cul-de-sac was a awesome setting for a show. It was very relatable. Like, it was almost like you were watching kids from a real neighborhood, except they got into antics that most kids probably wouldn't. But that's the thing, sometimes they did get into antics that kids would get into, like bartering with other kids, you know, getting in wars with other, you know, rival kids. You know, it's just all childhood fun that kind of was encapsulated into that show. The Amazing World of Gumball. Now, you had Gumball and Darwin, which were the main characters of the show, and then again, you have a very strong cast of supporting characters. You have the dad, Richard, the mom, which I can't remember her name right now, but she was like always kicking ass, which is kind of crazy because they made the dad in that show like a lazy sack of shit, and then the mom was always coming and like doing karate and whatever. So, you know, that was an interesting dynamic there. But one episode I specifically remember of Gumball is where he's in the woods and like something bigger keeps coming to eat like whatever's in front of him. Like, he's scared of something and then another one comes in, another one comes in. And I remember that just scared the crap out of me when I was younger, but there was a lot of episodes of Gumball that I absolutely loved. Like, I remember one episode where he went to the grocery store and there was something with the hot dogs. Like, I don't know, bro. That show had some crazy antics, just honestly kind of insane. And then I think there's also this one episode where Darwin like gets online and gets catfished. I don't know, I'm probably not correct about a lot of these plot lines. It's been probably 10 years since I saw an episode of Gumball, but the colors in that show were amazing. Again, the characters, pretty amazing. I can't remember many more specifics about Gumball, but that just one episode that was in my head was enough to make me want to talk about it, because if you guys remember that, then maybe you can relate. And then you had Uncle Grandpa, which is a show that was kind of later on compared to some of the other ones I'm talking about here. Man, oh man, that show, like, they were shooting rainbows out their ass and like eating pizza. That's like the best way I can describe it. I can't remember any of the plot lines, honestly, from Uncle Grandpa, because to be honest with you, most of the episodes kind of lacked the plot line. A lot of them were kind of bottle episodes in the RV. I believe that's like what they rode around in was the RV, but Mr. Gus was a character that really made that show for me. Like his deadpan humor, just the way that he looked. I think that was a really good addition to that show because it kind of balanced out the, what's a politically correct word for this? The non-smartness of the main character being Uncle Grandpa. It kind of balances out with Mr. Gus being a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more cynical style of character, but he still definitely has his goofy dialogue moments. Yeah, not much more to say about Uncle Grandpa, but if you've seen that show, you know it's kind of a trip. It's like one of them things where I imagine if I took an acid tab and watched that shit, my life would probably change forever. Now, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is one that honestly probably taught some of the best lessons out of any of the shows I'm going to talk about here, and it's something that took me a while to really realize. I appreciate this show much more than I did when I was younger. I watched it when I was younger, but I thought it was kind of weird. I thought the pacing was like kind of off. It had like kind of a hollow, empty vibe to it. But then you kind of get older and you realize that that's on purpose. It's like Blue being kind of the main character you follow. He's like a outcast of the other friends, and he kind of goes through his own journeys. These are all imaginary friends who have been dropped by their kids. Even the message of that is like it's a foster home for imaginary friends that kids have outgrown. And you know, that's something that I don't really remember having an imaginary friend per se, but definitely it captures that childhood innocence. And I remember this one episode where Blue like goes missing, I believe, and they have to go find him. And there's just a lot of plot lines in that show that really kind of teach you good lessons about friendship and kind of understanding yourself. You know, I'd have to rewatch it to really do it justice explaining it. But yeah, if you haven't ever watched that show, really kind of go back and watch it with an open mind. The characters are actually pretty layered from what I remember. Again, haven't seen it in a long time. But yeah, I wanted to touch on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends because honestly, really beautiful show. Now, Johnny Test. I really think the main thing that made me like Johnny Test was just the pacing of it, because you know, you kind of always had a build up to it, like them getting into something, and then it would be like a final battle or like a final conclusion. Like all the episodes kind of had a full plot line. Like it's not one of them shows where you watch it and then it continues on to the next one. It's kind of like every episode has its own identity. You know, Dookie, the dog, was probably my favorite character from Johnny Test, like by far. And then it's kind of funny because you have his sisters that are always trying to foil his plans and figure out what he's doing, and they're both like ultra smart. And then you got Johnny Test, who is kind of just a normal kid that happens to know how to use gadgets and has a kick-ass dog sidekick. You know, I mean, what can you say? I really think I just loved, like I said, the pacing, the action of Johnny Test. But again, I have to go back and watch Johnny Bravo, you know, years later, learning that Johnny Test and Bravo have literally nothing to do with each other at all. I feel so stupid for thinking that when I was younger. I don't know what I was on. And the thing is, his sisters were always making things like shrink and raise time machines that him and Dookie have to like work together to try to fix their mess, because these girls are super smart. But the problem with that is they're always making a bunch of shit that doesn't do exactly what it's meant to do. So Johnny definitely gets into some very interesting stuff. And now I want to touch on one that I don't know if many of you have even seen, but the Misadventures of Flapjack, or the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. Now, the Flapjack and the Captain were a very simple, like, dad-son type of dynamic, mentoree type of relationship. A lot of the episodes of that were Flapjack kind of being a kid, being stupid, and the captain having to come save him. I remember them very commonly sitting on a well, kind of just like chatting it out, talking about life and different things. I don't really remember any of the specific plots from that show, but I did want to touch on it because Flapjack, another show that had a really weird vibe to it, to be honest. Like, I'm not gonna act like it didn't, but I think something about how perky Flapjack was and just how silly and stupid he was kind of helped that show out a lot. The captain having to always save him. I don't know. Shout out Flapjack. Now, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Probably one of the best Star Wars things that was ever made. You had Anakin Skywalker is kind of like the main protagonist in this, and this was like before he became Darth Vader. And you had, I struggle to remember names of Star Wars people, but you had the green guy, the orange woman. They were both probably the best they've ever been in that. Now, I haven't watched many of the Star Wars movies in God knows how many years, so take that with a grain of salt. But the animation was peak on this. Every episode had a cool storyline to it. Wasn't ever huge on Star Wars, but I definitely loved this show. Specifically, anytime this would come on, I wanted to watch it because General Grievous was also like really cool looking in this show. I don't know, something about animated Star Wars shows works better for me, honestly, than the live action stuff does. And then you got Total Drama Island, which I have mentioned in one of my previous videos, but I loved Total Drama Island, man. Like, you know, it was basically a parody of all of these like real shows that do this, where they take people to a place, have them compete for money and eliminate them each week. But the fact of it being a cartoon, they could be a lot more wacky. And I loved how they kind of personified all of these animals, like the bears and the fish in the water and like the bees or whatever it may be. It's funny as hell how they always had them doing their confessionals like in the outhouse. You had a cast of characters that was all very different. I'm not even gonna front and act like I remember literally like any of their names other than Gwen. I remember, you know, hey, shout out to Gwen, man. If you know, you know. That was just one of the characters I remember because she was kind of like a bitch to everybody. She was one of the stronger characters. I want to say her boyfriend's name was like Trent or something. And then you had the chef. Chef was always hilarious, man of very few words, but when he comes on screen, he demands your attention. And then you have the host of the show, which I believe his name was Chris. That man is like a perfect representation of TV show hosts. He really could give a shit about the contestants, and it's just comedical because obviously they're animated people, so you don't have to feel bad for them. But it's honestly a really smart social commentary that I don't think people even pick up on a lot of the times. That Total Drama Island is literally making fun of a lot of these shows that they put on Netflix that everybody consumes nowadays, but it did it years before that was even a popular meta. I mean, it definitely already was, but it was kind of ahead of its time in predicting that that would be a big part of the television industry come like 10 years after its release. And then you have Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Now, I am a big Scooby-Doo mark. I may make a whole video on Scooby-Doo one of these days, going back and looking at the Hanna-Barbera series and all the many multitudes of movies and eras Scooby-Doo has had. In the Mystery Incorporated show, they take the gang back to their hometown of Crystal Cove, claimed to be the hauntedest place on Earth. In this series, it's kind of a different dynamic because, you know, you always have had Fred and Daphne. Well, Daphne's getting pissed off at Fred because he's got this fixation on traps throughout the whole series. You have Shaggy and Velma actually exploring an on-screen relationship, which is something that had been kind of teased at for many years in many Scooby-Doo series, but they finally pulled the trigger on it there and kind of let us fully explore that. Now, Mystery Inc. was kind of weird for Scooby-Doo because it had a different vibe to it. It was kind of gritty, kind of darker, like the monsters were real. It wasn't people behind a mask. It was kind of like a overarching storyline where they're piecing together clues in their hometown to try to find out who's causing all of these crazy events that are happening. And I honestly love that show. The animation, the way that they did the character development, the monsters in it were very nice. Even the set pieces, which I know it's weird to say set pieces considering it's all animated, but what would typically be set pieces if it was filmed live action, all of that really fit well together. Like all the pieces of the puzzle came together really great for me in Mystery Inc. And I also remember around this time, they released a lot of really dope Scooby-Doo movies with the characters from this show. And one of them that I remember is like the Lagoon Monster or something, like where they're at this summer camp and there's like a man-fish monster swimming around. And from what I remember, that was actually a real monster too. Like this was around the era of Scooby-Doo where they kind of ditched the man behind the mask gimmick and started having them fight like real supernatural entities, which I found really cool, really, really cool. And now to kind of like wrap it off with one that I have touched on in my 2010s video, Annoying Orange. Now, I don't really have much more to say about that other than the fact that Annoying Orange, as I said in that previous video, shouldn't have entertained me, but for whatever reason it did. It's literally just fruits on a screen yelling about shit for like 10-minute intervals. Like it wasn't even a full show. It actually started on YouTube as well. Like it's a YouTube thing that Cartoon Network picked up from my understanding. So I don't even think it's one that was ever meant to be as popular as it was, but for people like me who kind of had that ADHD brain about it and found it interesting, I guess it really just hit that spot. Now, I've probably missed some shows in this. Honestly, I know I have. Like, there's no way I didn't, because over the, 20, 30, 40 years of history that Cartoon Network has, there's been shows after shows after shows, some that were very short-lived, some that were big series and went on for a long time. But the last thing that I wanted to say before I end this video off is that regular show ending was probably one of the most like emotional a cartoon has ever made me when they were in space and Pop sacrificed himself to save the rest of the crew. I forgot to mention that in my regular show portion. Man, again, one of the best shows that Cartoon Network ever made, one of the best cartoons ever made, in my humble opinion. But with that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed this look back at Cartoon Network shows. I apologize that I wasn't able to elaborate on it, some of them as much as I did others, but that's simply just based on what I watched the most of, and I didn't want to overload this video with just reading a bunch of facts off a screen that I didn't already have in my head. I really prefer to do these videos as least scripted as possible, just with a good structure. And you guys seem to be loving them so far, and I thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, drop a like, leave a comment, and yeah, I appreciate the hell out of you guys. The success the channel's been seeing on these videos recently is just blowing my mind. I can't believe it. I'm very excited for the future of the channel. I pray you guys continue to enjoy these, and I hope that if you're watching this, you have a great day, great night, whenever you're watching it. And yeah, go back and watch some of those Cartoon Network shows when you get a chance. Good nostalgia hit. I do a regular show sometimes, but yeah, man, I'll see y'all in whatever I do next. Greatly appreciate you being here, and yeah, see you soon.